So, we're joined here today by Margaret Nagle, screenwriter of the upcoming film The Good Lie. Hi, Margaret.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
This is a really crazy time in Hollywood. You've taken this film to the Toronto International Film Festival. You're entering awards season. In this hectic, crowded time, what do you hope makes The Good Lie stand out to audiences?
The story. It's an amazing story, and we have a cast of actors who are former refugees, child soldiers, survivors. One's a lost boy. They're remarkable. So and Reese Witherspoon's amazing in a small supporting role that's very different part for her, very unlike anything she's played before. And Corey Stoll. And the story it's a remarkable story, true story of survival against everything. So I think at Toronto, it was so interesting because they were all so shocked and blown away because the film isn't what they expected it to be. Because Philippe Falardeau is very much an independent filmmaker. He's French-Canadian. He took a very different approach to the material. It's very un-Hollywood. Even though it has a Hollywood marketing plan, it's a very un-Hollywood film. And so people, when they see it, they're laughing and they're crying. They're very moved. They're very shocked. And they leave in a very different place. It takes you on a journey.
Well, then I'm glad we're talking to you today because you can let us know that this has an indie feel to it because it does have a very Hollywood-esque ad campaign. But you speak of the draw of the story. What originally led you to this material?
Well, it was 11 years ago, and I'd written my first screenplay, but I hadn't sold it. It was my spec, and I got representation out of it, and it was an open assignment at Paramount with the producer Bobby Newmeyer, who did Sex Lies and Videotape, and I wanted to go in on it. I had a part-time job. I sold purses out of the trunk of my car. And two of my suppliers were these guys from Senegal whose grandfathers came from Sudan. Because Sudan, people have had to disperse for the last... There was a civil war in 1955. There's a civil war in 1980s. It's a very dangerous place. So their family got to Senegal, and they were my bag suppliers in Los Angeles, and I was watching them adjust to LA. And adjust to this American way of life. And so when I heard about the movie, I was like, I have to get in there and get a shot at this. Which, of course, my agents were like, Margaret, you haven't had a film yet. This is a big, sorry. And I was like, just get me in with the person who makes coffee for the person who makes coffee, okay? So I didn't hear for, 2 months, maybe 6 weeks, 2 months. But in the meantime, I decided I was going to do all this research, learn everything I could about the subject matter, and come up with a story. So I did finally get a meeting with the person who made the coffee, and I went in and I was like, it's about these two brothers, Theo and Mamer, and their brother Daniel, Paul and Jeremiah, and I started pitching the whole movie. And they meet this woman in America, and they go through the desert, and he goes to night school, reads Huck Finn, everything. And he was like, okay, hang on a second, calm down, let me get the next person. And I went to this guy's office, Bobby Newmeyer's office, and met and pitched all day long until I finally pitched to Bobby Newmeyer.
Oh, that's great.
And then he took me into Paramount, and I got the job.
Well, this is a topic that's been covered in the media, the news and documentaries. What do you think a fictional film like this, it's based on true events, but a fictional narrative, what do you think this brings to the table that, the news and documentaries can't quite capture?
Because the news and documentaries could make it personal.
Mm-hmm.
And this is personal. When you dive into the arc of a character, you're going into their point of view of what happened. A documentary is always from the documentarian's point of view. This is going into the character's personal story of what happened. So like when you look at a film like Private Ryan, those are all D-Day's a real event, those are fictional characters. Everything that happens in Private Ryan really did happen in some way or another, but it's been put together in a way that fits the three-act structure of a movie and also allows you to dive into the point of view of characters. So you actually go through what these kids experienced from start to finish and see it through their eyes. And then by the time they get to America, you don't look at them like you see the whole person, and then suddenly you have Americans looking at them like, I don't know who you are, I don't know where you're from, you're just some immigrant, and you're 30 minutes into knowing who they are, and you're like, don't treat them like that, won't believe what they've been through. So there's this it's a very active narrative. It's a very active story for an audience to watch.
You know, you've come a long way in your career since that original spec script and working your way up in Bobby's office. You've done a lot of TV writing, award-winning work. How would you say, considering how much TV has grown in terms of quality and regard within the industry, is it just the three-act structure that separates film and TV? What's the difference between the two?
TV allows you to go into the world of a character over the long haul and really built out a story like a great novel. And I think that like Breaking Bad is an example where you took this character and you really were able to go into every single one of his relationships with his children, with his wife, with his in-laws, with his work, the man he wanted to be, the man he wasn't going to be, and follow that down that road. And again, I do think that we still have to look at cable and network and how radically different they are.
Yes.
You are, you cannot ever compare them. And it's interesting sometimes when reviewers from getting all this great cable television, which is TV written the way it should be, and then they go to network and they're like, what is this stuff? And you're like, well, you've got federal communications, you've got a network, you've got a studio, you've got advertisers. It's amazing network TV gets made at all. It's so restrictive, it's so hard to make. And then cable, all TV is hard to make, but then cable, at least you're given the freedom. Once they believe in your idea, certainly at HBO, they're like, oh yeah, go for it. Don't hold back. Don't edit.
Well, you really know the business, and you say you want to move into comic books. You have a producing background as well. You're a writer, and then also you've done some acting. Why do you think today so many people in Hollywood have to be multi-hyphenates?
It's just better. It's so much better that way. I mean, you know your job, but you also know how your job relates to someone else's job. So, like, from being an actor, I know every single person's job on that crew, which is something that writers who've just been writing alone in their room, they don't have that production experience. So I came into this with production experience from simply having to be the person in front of the camera that all those people have to put their stuff together to shoot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, and from producing, I know all about selling, I know all about pitching, and then I know all about finding the right elements to put it together and then get it started, and I know about budget, and like I drive people crazy because I'm really good with knowing exactly how much things cost. But it's the only because
But that must help you with your writing too, because you can write to budget.
Right, I can write to budget, and I can pull back budget, and I know how to cut really well. I'm really good at cutting. I have a weird that freaks people out because I know how to cut my material very judiciously and suck money out. But then it's so funny. I was writing a script last year for Showtime, and the head of Showtime was like, "No, write it big, write it unedited. This is too, like, you're already seeing the bottom line. Don't do my work for me. I want you to write it." I said, I am writing this like a little like a producer. And I need to take that hat off right now and think, and let things blow up, and we don't care.
Well, I think you're a perfect person to ask this because one of the questions that I get asked so much on this show is from aspiring screenwriters. And they want to know how to start their careers. They don't want to go down the wrong path. So what would you suggest? What advice would you give to somebody out there who just dreams of being a screenwriter in the industry?
Well, it's so much hard work. It's so hard. Even when you're writing well, it's so hard. I mean, I was fired off this movie, this script. You have to write well. And you have to be, my spec script, Warm Springs, I spent 4 years
That's
your
television film about FDR.
Yeah,
right?
It was made by HBO, and it did really well, won a bunch of awards. But it was my spec.
Wow.
So that was the script I started with. And people were like, you can't write a movie about people in wheelchairs, Margaret. And I was like, well, you know what? This is what I want to write about. So one thing I always say is, don't try and write something you think will sell, because you're already compromising from the very beginning. Mm-hmm. You have to write something that you are passionate about, a story that you can work on endlessly and not get tired of. And you have to have something you really want to say with that story. And then you have to be willing to work at it and know that it's not perfect, and to keep going back. Put it down, go back. Put it down, go back. Hear notes from people. Like, I'll never forget I would allow certain people. I wouldn't have one person read every draft. I'd save reads for certain people, certain drafts, so that I wasn't getting the same notes on the same draft all the time, because that's not helpful either. So you sort of stagger the reads, and I kept slowly handing it out to friends and getting notes back. But one of the first notes I got on Warm Springs was, I don't understand what polio is. And it was to a group of young writers, and I went, oh, then I haven't. Polio is one of the villains in the piece. I'm not portraying polio. I'm assuming people understand what that is. It was one of the first notes. And then, and it's hard. You think you've reached this point in the script, and it's so great, and someone reads it and says, I don't get this part. And you want to kill them. You stab them. And then you're like, thanks so much for reading it. And then you go back and you go, oh, shoot, I do have to listen to this note. So you have to humble yourself when you write a script. It's a very humbling process. And if you want it to be a good script. And you only get one read from an agency or from a producer. So if you give them a script that's not good enough, you're never getting back in the door again. You have one shot. And I cannot emphasize that enough. So your script, you can't give them a script that you're like, oh, I'm going to do some more work, and maybe it's like, no. It has to be ridiculously awesome before you give it to an agent or put it in a screenwriting competition or whatever.
How long did it take you to write the version of Warm Springs that you felt was your spec?
4 years.
Okay, excellent.
So, and I had part-time jobs, and I did a bunch of other things, so I could keep writing it, and it was good. I'd have to put it down for a period of time, and I'd pick it back up again. And then I gave it to this one screenwriter who was like, it's just not good enough. I thought it would be better. You haven't. He was brutal. And I hung up the phone. He called me back a week later, and he goes, are you ever speaking to me again? And I went, nope, I'm never speaking again. And he's like, oh my God, Margaret. And then I went back and I looked at the script really critically. And I made some really tough cuts in it. And I added 2 more scenes, and then he called me again and he said, no, I'll read it again. I said, I'm never giving you anything of mine to read again. He goes, no, please. And so I gave it to him again. He called me back and he said, it reads like Steve Salian wrote it, Margaret. Wow. It's completely on another level. You know, and really I just had to be pushed to do this one last hard look at it. And I got an agent. It went to an agency and they called me within hours and brought me in.
That's fantastic. Oh,
yeah, and it got made. So it was right to wait that long. As hard as it was to wait and keep working, it needed that.
That's excellent. Congratulations on The Good Lie, and thank you for such a candid and interesting interview.
So I want everybody to go see it. I swear you will not be disappointed. Write me on Twitter. I'll talk about the movie with you. Go see it.